Hi, I'm Nate, and we have Madeline and Rachel here as well. We're going to be talking about Esther's case study. So we're going to be going over some of the questions, and then we're going to be talking about our own thoughts concerning this case study. So the first section we're going to go over is the general assessment questions. First one says, what legal decisions and or classroom decisions were made in this case? So when it comes to classroom decisions, a bilingual aid was given to Esther to help her. An IEP meeting was set up, and so the school administrators and the teacher and even the parents were involved in deciding on what would be best for Esther, and they got together. Later on, so some decisions that had more of a legal implication, the IEP team decided to actually write an IEP, and they confirmed that Esther was eligible for a disability. So that is the first question. The second question says, what procedures illustrated best practice? So some of the best practice that they used in their assessment, I thought they did a good job of evaluating and using assessment data that had been gathered. One of the problems with that is that they didn't have much data. They didn't have much insight into where she had come from in the orphanage in Mexico. The parents were very involved in the meetings, which was a very good practice, and they had the full parental support, which is very important when you're working with the students. Also, they involved specialists that were bilingual and that were able to talk with Esther and to help her more. Something they could have done a little better is maybe put some more interventions in the classroom and helped her out there. Rachel and Madeline, you guys have any ideas about that? Are there any things that you guys think they could have done a little better?
No, I think you said it well. I think that they had appropriate conduct as the professional should.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think just the fact that they were able to get the parents on board and that everyone was able to get on the same page, it totally worked the way that it needed to.
Right.
Awesome. All right, the third question is, was the assessment consistent with appropriate ethical conduct expected from professionals? I would say yes. Overall, I think they followed the due process quite well. I think they went through all the steps. The outcome is probably something I'm a little more iffy on. I don't know if the decision they made at the end was the best decision, although I do think they did their homework. I do think they worked on it very hard, and they are concerned for the student. But it just makes me wonder, if there was some bias in there concerning the decision they made at the end. What do you guys think?
So I think that there wasn't. Well, I think there could have been a little bit of bias in there, and that's something that I'll talk about in a minute too. I think there could have been some for sure.
Okay, so we'll get more into that.
Right.
Yeah, I definitely think there could have been, but I think it'll come up later in the discussion. So,
all right, my turn.
Yep.
All right. So under the test interpretation issues, question number 1 was, is it acceptable practice to administer formal assessments to a child who has been in the U.S. for 1 year and who did not attend school in Mexico? For this, I thought yes. I think it would be appropriate because, especially if the child had not attended school over in Mexico, I think it would be important and very valuable to have those assessments and understand kind of where the child's at so that you have something to go off of. So I definitely think that that is appropriate practice. And question number 2, are current assessment results biased by Esther's cultural background and original language? So I think that this is where we were talking about a minute ago. I think, yes, there definitely could be some bias in there because the assessment results show, she's really just a little behind. What do you guys think on this question?
Yeah, I think this is kind of, you got to be careful because she's being assessed the same way the other kids whose first language is English. She's being assessed the same way. You definitely have to be careful when you're assessing her because she comes from a very different background and she's going to learn differently and think differently. So if you're comparing her to the other students, it can be very dangerous because you're going to have skewed results and you're not going to fully understand what she's capable of.
Right.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, without testing her on a level that she'll be able to understand everything, you're not going to get the correct results that you're looking for.
Right. Okay, very good. Question number 3. Based on the assessment information, describe Esther's current level of functioning. So we can see that in the daily living skills, she's at a normal where she should be for her age level, but everything else she scored a little bit below. And in school, she's a couple of grade levels behind. And we understand that that's because, she didn't really get an education over in Mexico. She came from an orphanage where it wasn't fostered. And before that, with her mom, sounds like her mom didn't really bring her to school either. So we understand why, but the answer is that she is a couple grade levels behind. She's just behind everyone else. Question number 4, does Esther have the disability of mental impairment? If so, what evidence supports this conclusion? And if not, why not? So I said no, I don't think she has mental impairment. I think there's no real evidence to show that she does. And like we've said, she's really just behind. She didn't have the resources available that like the other children in the U.S. her age have had. So I don't think that there's any disability there. I think she just is behind everyone else.
Yeah, all the evidence they cited within the case study, none of it, proved that there was anything different between her and other kids that were struggling in their academics.
Right.
It didn't sound like there's any sort of disability that was holding her back from what we could see in the case study.
Right.
I totally agree. So on the last set of questions, it's the other assessment issues. The first question is describe what you know about Esther's original culture and language background. So what I found was that she lived with her mom from birth to age 7. Her mom didn't necessarily treat her super well. So her mom didn't bring her to school. She didn't help her learn how to speak or anything. It mentioned that when she went to counseling, she said that her mom, it was more of like the typical culture there of the children are seen but not heard. And so she didn't need to almost be taught how to speak in general because she wasn't going to listen. And then it also said that she was abused slightly as a child by her mom's boyfriends. And then, so she totally didn't just know, the culture was harsh and the language background wasn't great. So then after age 7, she was found abandoned at a bus station and taken to the orphanage to live for a year for 2.5 years in Mexico City. And it was under the Mother Teresa Foundation in that orphanage. So and then she was adopted at age 9.5 and brought to the United States. And that brings us to the second question. It says, describe what you know about Esther's assimilation into her adoption culture and language. So she was adopted into a family that spoke Spanish, but also English. And they did bring her multiple cultural events to help her stay with her Mexican culture and everything. They brought her to church and made sure, but she did have trouble learning both English and Spanish. But they said that they saw significant improvement over the year with the speaking. And so, and then the third question is, how does Esther's regular education 3rd grade teacher feel about Esther and why? And what I found was that it said she was slightly frustrated, not because Esther wasn't trying. She said Esther was trying and she was trying to learn and interact with other kids, but that she just needed more time almost to pick up on what was being taught. She said Esther was good and attentive. She just couldn't pick up on it without some one-on-one attention. And while she did have an aide 2 hours a day for 4 days a week, she needed a little bit more than that. And that's why in the end called Ellen Jacoby, I think is how you pronounce it, the school psychiatrist, to bring the IEP team together. So do y'all have anything to add to that part?
No, I agree with what you're saying. Yeah. I just think they didn't quite know how to handle Esther's situation.
Yeah, I think it was definitely a hard situation to handle, especially because she was not only trying to get used to a new school, but get used to a completely new family. She had 2 new siblings to deal with. It was just a really hard situation in general.
Mm-hmm. I think it seems like that with the help she's getting, like, or with the, the tutors and whatnot, she'll be on the right track. I don't think it's anything like completely detrimental or whatever. I think she just needs extra help, but she'll be on track.
For sure, I totally agree.
Cool.
All right.
So real quick before we end, there's a little thing at the end I just wanted to discuss really fast, just in case we need to go over that. So it talks about this activity where you imagine that you're magically transported to Ukraine and everyone speaks and writes Russian, and it has to describe the difficulties you might experience in daily living, work, transportation, and other people. I think that's a good example that pertains to this case study because how would we feel if we were a young kid just uprooted and moved to a place where you can't speak the language and nothing makes sense? I think you would have a very similar result for most kids. I would have big issues if that happened to me. I would struggle very hard in school.
Yeah. I mean, I think Esther was handling the whole situation maturely because I feel like me, if I was just transported to another country where I couldn't understand anything, I wouldn't even handle it as well as she did. So,
yeah, I agree that example at the bottom is really interesting and accurate because it kind of gives you it gives you more like sympathy almost. Like imagine if that were you, if you were in her shoes. So it's interesting.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. I think that concludes our case study.
Perfect. Thanks, guys.